Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tabletop Talks. Today we have Magic Misha Mingo teaching us about how to get creative on a budget with cosplay. Very exciting. I will let you introduce yourself and get started. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to present on something that I know a little bit about, cosplaying on a budget. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Misha. I started cosplaying probably around, I want to say maybe 2017. Um, a lot of it was like Magical Girls, Sailor Moon. That's what I grew up with. And I've got in phases of being really into it, taking breaks, and I think honestly that's healthy to take breaks when you need to. But yeah, I've been cosplaying for a while now. Started cosplaying in Magic. I started with my Fibblethip cosplay back at good old Oktoberfest in 2022. Busted that costume out in a couple of weeks because I heard they were going to have a cosplay competition, and I was like, well, might as well give it a go. And so, if you've ever seen a Fibblethip running around a convention, there's a good chance that might have been me. Um, I started doing more cosplays in the Magic scene, and you'll get to see some pictures of those later on in this presentation. But yeah, that's who I am. I do some other stuff too. I make silly memes sometimes. I made one for this presentation. I hope you like it. So let's go ahead and jump in and start talking about cosplaying on a budget. So, first off, I'm going to start with some things to do before you start any of your cosplays, whether it's on a budget or if you have an like unlimited budget. You're going to want to ask yourself some important questions. First off, what is your budget? Because if you don't have a budget, you can kind of get a little crazy with things. You can commission people. Honestly, there's plenty of people that there's always going to be somebody out there that's going to be more talented at you, and if you have the money to hire them, they make a living doing that. So if you have an unlimited budget, you should consider commissioning. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to say that our budget is low, so we're going to try to do as much as we can ourselves. The next question is this a solo costume or are you doing this as part of a group? Because if you're doing it as part of a group, there might be some things you need to consider. Are you trying to have uniform aspects? Are you trying to do everything in the same sort of craftsmanship? What parts are you making? What parts are you buying? So figure out if it's a group costume or a solo costume to figure out which aspects you can uh, make yourself or how you're going to approach those. The next question, what level of craftsmanship are you aiming for? If you're just looking to do, say, maybe a closet cosplay or kind of like a more low budget, kind of like a meme cosplay, like I did a Quintorius cosplay that was, a jacket, a fake pregnant belly, and some elephant ears. I didn't, I, I spent money on it, but I didn't really, put a ton of craftsmanship into it. But there's also been costumes where I have put a lot of time and effort into it. I may not have put as much money into it, but the level of craftsmanship was pretty high and a lot of effort went into making it. So figure out what type of cosplay am I looking for? Am I looking for a really polished look or something that's just going to make people, laugh and smile and want to get pictures with you? To go along with this, figure out if you're trying to do uh, a competition piece. Because if you're doing competition pieces, that also kind of has its own stuff that you have to consider because a lot of those require you to make a certain percentage of it yourself. So that's kind of all what goes into that question is what am I aiming for this end piece to look like? And then the next thing is what is your time frame? Because if you have a convention in 2 weeks, you're going to have to figure out some ways to get creative and be pretty quick with it. Whereas if you're working with like a 6 month time frame, you can break things down, you can work on them, you can give yourself time, you can learn some new skills. So figuring out what that time frame is really important because you're going to know if you're going to have breathing room or if you're going to be in crunch mode for, you know, days on end. So the next ones, we're going to go more into depth on these in some later slides, but a big part of it is what tools and skills do I already have? And what am I going to need to learn in order to make this costume? And then after that, where am I going to get my materials? So these are all really important questions that you're going to want to ask to figure out how you're going to make your costume, no matter what level or budget you're working with. All right. So another thing that you're going to want to do at the very start of the cosplay costume creation period is you're going to want to break it down into pieces. Anytime that I look at a costume, I immediately get overwhelmed. It doesn't matter what character it is. I am like, okay, that's a creature. I am a human. How am I going to make this? So I will start by getting a reference photo. Pulling as many references as you can is going to be helpful because sometimes you have multiple artists working on the same creature, and different artists will take different approaches and have different, stylistic interpretations of things. So you're going to want to pull the references for whatever character or creature you're making. And then you're going to want to break it down. So for me, when I looked at doing Fibblethip, my big things were obviously I need a blue bodysuit of some sort, but I'm going to need to make an eyeball. I'm going to need to make these kind of sharp, pointy teeth, and I'm going to need to make a loincloth. So breaking it down into smaller pieces is going to help you figure out how you're going to approach making the costume as a whole, and then you can start planning on how you're going to tackle each of those pieces individually, figure out what materials you're going to need, what patterns, what tools, and ultimately what skills are going to go into making each of those pieces. So we'll start off with skills. Do you have the skills for the job? It's okay if you don't, because there are a lot of resources out there that will teach you those skills. There are tutorials for just about everything. YouTube is going to be your best friend. There are creators that have been doing cosplay for a living for a long time and make their entire living off of providing tutorials and patterns and resources to help other cosplayers succeed. You might not be able to find the exact thing that you're making, but if you have something similar, I know for an example, when I was making my Judith costume, I needed to make horns for my headpiece. And the closest thing I could think of that would be similar to Judith headpiece horns were Maleficent horns. So, and you know how many people cosplay Disney. So I looked up Maleficent horns tutorial and I found something out there that was pretty darn similar. And I was able to use that same type of tutorial and tweak it in small ways to work for my Judith horns. So if you're looking for something but you don't have quite the right fit, figure out what's something you've seen that's pretty similar and figure out how you can tweak it. You're going to want to also take the time to practice, because I can't tell you how many times that I have started something that I was like, isn't going to be very hard. I have a plan in my head for how this is going to work, and I'm going to do it. And then I go and try, and it does not come together at all. And then I'm like, where did this go wrong? How did this go wrong? So you're going to want to, if it's a new skill that you're not familiar with, allow yourself some time and allow yourself to make mistakes. That is the biggest thing, is that most people aren't perfect. I don't think anybody's perfect, but some people, fail more than others. I have failed quite a bit. And you're going to want to take some time to practice, and you might end up going through 1, 2, 3 different iterations of something before you figure out how you wanted to do it and end up with a product that you actually like. So, and then obviously just refining those skills, it just takes time. So the next part is use your community, and I see Max in the chat. There is actually a Magic the Gathering cosplay community Discord server that has a lot of highly skilled cosplayers in it that are always very, very open to answering questions and providing feedback and basically just helping if you have a question about pretty much any topic. There's people in there that have expertise on just about any skill you can think of that are happy to answer questions and lend a hand where they can. So just make sure that you're reaching out to your community. There are also other cosplay communities. I know that I have friends that do a lot of magical girl stuff that if I ever have questions, I can ask them. But there are people around that will talk to you and help you figure out ways to approach things. Or even if you just don't know the right questions to ask, they can help you just figure out the questions to kind of do your own deep dive on the internet. So this is the slide about skills. Next, tools. So a big barrier to entry for cosplay is the tools. And I won't lie, now that I've been doing cosplay for years, I have built up an arsenal of tools. But when I first started out, I did not have a lot of these things. I was using, someone actually gifted me a sewing machine. It didn't work great, but I was gifted a sewing machine and I was making things work with hot glue and dreams. So when you're starting out, getting the tools is going to be one of the more difficult things as a entryway into cosplay. But something that I didn't know back then is that there are places that you can borrow tools from. Your local library is a huge, huge resource. A lot of libraries, if you get a library card, they will have 3D printers. They have, oh gosh, I know they have like sound recording software, cameras. I know that's not exactly cosplay, but if you ever want to get photos or do videos, there's those type of things. Some of them will even do like classes on how to use a 3D printer or learn modeling. I'm not so sure about tools per se, but I know that 3D printers and other like those aspects and just other crafting seminars are sometimes held at libraries. So just checking out your local library and seeing what they offer is a huge first place to start. The next one I want to talk about is community tool banks. So some of those things that like saws, heat guns, and some of those other large tools that are also expensive, you might have a community tool bank that you can look up where you can go there and you might have to pay a small fee to use the tool bank, but it's going to be far less than purchasing those items yourself. And they might make you take like a small safety course on how to use them properly, but it's a huge tool or huge resource in the community. Same thing with maker spaces. So some of the other things that may not be at the library or at a community tool bank, you'll probably find out at a makerspace. It's pretty similar to the library where they'll want to usually give you some training, and there are people with expertise in how to use the tools. These are the kind of places where you'll probably find sewing machines, embroidery machines. I'm blanking on what other tools there are, but you'll probably find 3D printers. And there's a chance that they might even have like some crafting items, like such as thread and cloth to practice on there. I was also going to say that there are some community locations. I know that I'm originally from the Kansas City area. There was a place called Scraps KC where if you had any leftover cloth or fabric, you could donate it. And basically, it was kind of like an upcycling center. So some larger places will even have upcycling centers where you can get cheaper materials to work on fabric crafts and I think even foam. So a lot of it is just seeing what is in your community that you might have access to so that you can, spend less money on the tools and even on some of the materials that you might need for your projects. I do want to stress that when working with tools, you always want to figure out what the hazards are. Obviously, working with saws, heat guns, they're going to have, potential for cuts or burns, even sewing machines. Other things to think about are chemicals. I know that I work a lot with contact cement. It's basically a heavy duty glue and spray paint. So you want to make sure that you're ventilating. So keep in mind that a lot of stuff that you're going to work with, you're going to want to have goggles or at least eyeglasses and respirators. I know I do a lot of dremeling on foam, and you do not want to be breathing in all of that foam debris. It gets everywhere, and just the stuff that I've seen collect on my arms, I do not want that in my lungs. And yes, resin especially. Thanks, Ryan. So be very conscientious of what chemicals and tools you're working with, and make sure that you're working with them safely. So, all right, that's tools. So, this is that lovely meme I made that I'm very, very proud of, so I hope you all like it. Sourcing those materials. Kind of like what I talked about earlier, those upcycling centers. You can get fabric and other crafts items there. Not every location is going to have an upcycling center, but if you do have one in your area, definitely go check it out. A lot of them are run by really cool people in the community. If they care about recycling, like they're usually, in my experience, good, cool people. So if you have one in your region, go check them out and support them. Another thing, thrift stores. I can't tell you how many times that I just needed some fabric to basically make mock-ups, um, to just see if what I'm making will even, sit correctly, or if I need to extend things, or if sometimes I'll even use my mock-up as my lining for my final craft piece. And you can get really, really cheap cotton sheets at thrift stores. And you can just buy them in bulk. They make great mock-ups, mock-up fabric. Um, there's also there's I was the insect child from Zira. I bought myself a full suit from a thrift store for like less than $10. So sometimes you can find like pretty much whole costumes that look pretty nice at a thrift store. Obviously Antony needed a bee head, but getting the suit was pretty nice at the thrift store. Yeah, as long as you love your 80 shoulders pads, you always have to leave those in. That's the one rule. You can't cut them out. Um, but yeah, definitely check out your thrift stores and see what they have, because that's not a bad place to start. You can get a lot for really cheap there, and it also is another form of upcycling, just stuff that people don't want to use anymore. I personally, my favorite thing to do is to just walk around my house and see what items laying around might make a good incorporation into whatever project I'm looking at next. So, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but on my Grist cosplay, my arms for Grist are literally made of old crutches from when I broke my leg back in 2017 that have just been in my garage. So the fact that I got to upcycle my own junk in my house, love that. So if you're a little bit of, yeah, any curtains that may or may not be keeping the sun out of your house, cut them up, use them. Um, Funny enough, I will show you some pictures of a costume that is made almost entirely out of curtains, and you would be surprised by how nice it looks. But yeah, the random items and junk around your house may make it into a costume if you so want. Next thing, dollar stores, clearance aisles. I can't tell you how many times I've just driven to a Dollar General or a Walmart and just walked up and down the aisles looking at little, children's toys, clearance things that I didn't even know existed or that I needed because I didn't need them. But I saw them and I'm like, this will be a good incorporation, and ended up getting them from really cheap. And it is now part of a costume in some place or another. And then, of course, finally, you have your conventional outlets. There are plenty of craft stores. Rest in peace, Joann's, but there is still Michael's. And there is Hobby Lobby, but I don't sing their praises. But you can go the conventional outlet to get your foam and your fabric and other things that you need for your costumes if you can't get them at any of these other places that might be a bit cheaper. All right, so now let me show you some of examples of where I've used these things in my costumes. So, Ryan, you talked about taking down your curtains. This is my Zuko costume. I wore it to a convention a couple years ago. Um, Almost every piece of fabric in this costume, with the exception of, my shoes, my black leggings, this was all made out of fabric or curtains. So I think my roommate actually helped and made a good portion of this costume for me. We cranked it out the night before the convention because they already had most of their Uncle Iroh costume done. And so me being their Zuko was kind of a last minute addition. But they went to Walmart and were like, I found these nice curtains for pretty cheap, but they have a nice texture to them. And I think it would make for a good costume. And so most of this outfit, almost the entirety of this outfit, was made from Walmart curtains. And looking at it, I don't think anyone would ever guess that because it just looks fancy. The fabrics look expensive because for some reason you can get really cheap curtains. Maybe it's because they're so textured and fancy that people are like, I'm not going to hang that in my house. But for whatever reason, we got these gaudy curtains that made for a wonderful Zuko costume. Those boots, those were my Renaissance Festival boots that I had bought the year before, so I just reused those. The eye makeup. So you can get liquid latex for relatively cheap. If you're going to work with liquid latex, make sure that you do like a test patch on your arm before you're planning to wear it to a convention, just to make sure that you don't have any type of, allergic reaction, especially if you're going to put it around your eyeball, like I did. But if you're looking for even just like a burn to do some sort of burn special effects, a little bit of liquid latex and toilet paper goes a long way. That's how I did my eye makeup, and then I just kind of filled it in with shades of red eyeshadow. So this costume overall, I think it was definitely less than $100. It may have been even less than 50. So, and it's probably one of my costumes that I'm really proud of and I think looks stunning. And the fact that the price point on it is so low is just kind of mind blowing. Yeah, I can honestly thank my roommate for that. This was really early into me getting into cosplay, so a lot of this was actually my roommate's skill. So bless them for this costume. All right, next. So, well, my favorite little guy, Fibblethip. So this costume also pretty cheap. I think the most expensive thing was the blue bodysuit, which may have been $20-$30, but it's just a blue bodysuit that my roommate um, just airbrushed while I was in it. Just so you know that if you're in a bodysuit while someone is airbrushing you, it tickles a lot. But the loincloth, it is just like some burlap fabric that I picked up at, I think it was Michael's. Um, I I knew that I wanted him to look kind of like a grungy little guy, so I was like, burlap loincloth sounds great. So I put a little bit of elastic in the waistband, but I just cut a little burlap fabric, sewed the sides together, and just snipped the bottom to give me that little loincloth look, and that was pretty cheap and easy. Um, I bought a little, loincloth chic. I bought a blue what is it called? A balaclava that goes over my face and just my eyes peek through. And I literally just hot glued. Those are fake nails. I bought like a budget pack of fake nails that have like 20 different colors. And so I just popped the white fake nails, cut them into little points, put a little black paint on the tips because I figured Fibblethip did not have good oral hygiene. And then I just hot glued them to the face mask. I painted the back black to, look like the inside of a mouth, and just hot glued those suckers on. And that's Fibblethip's teeth. That's also Fibblethip's fingernails too. His teeth and nails look eerily similar if you ever get to see the costume up close. And then the eyeball is actually just a face shield. So I bought a value pack. One thing you'll also find out about me is I like buying things in bulk. So I bought a pack of 5 face shields, and I just reverse painted the eyeball. So I started with the middlemost black dot, the pupil, and just started working my way out and just painted it in reverse. And the face shield just sits kind of on top of my head and rests there so that I can kind of see out the bottom. It is not the most visually easy cosplay. I do kind of have to do my best to look out the bottom of it, but I made it work. And then the only other thing on this costume that I pretty much just bought were the elf ears. I bought a 2-pack of elf ears. You can get them online from Amazon. There's a long ear pack and a short ear pack, and I just painted them blue and hot glued those suckers onto the head. So this was a pretty cheap and easy costume. I would say that, honestly, yes, hot glue was the MVP. I tried super glue on the fake nails on the feet first because I figured if it's on the foot, then it works or doesn't work. I would at least figure out on the part that people would see the least. And super glue goes through fabric pretty fast, and it stuck to my actual sock, and then I had to rip my actual sock out of the thing, and it tore my sock. So this costume did eat one sock in the process. But yeah, so that was a little bit of trial and error of figuring out which glue to use to adhere the fake nails to the costume. But yeah, overall, I want to say this costume was definitely less than $100, probably less than 75. The bodysuit was definitely the most expensive thing. Buying the pack of fake nails, buying the whole pack of eye shields, that also gave me stuff left over, and I've worn this Fibblethip costume a lot. I have had multiple teeth and nails fall off, and I've been able to just pick from the other stuff I've had from the leftover nails to replace them. So buying in bulk kind of has worked out for me because I've had ample replacement pieces. Right, so that's Fibblethip. This is something that will be in a video around Halloween time, so it's something that hasn't really seen much on social media, but these are just some eyeballs I made for, Gary from SpongeBob for somebody to wear in a video. This was something that I literally did in maybe 2 hours, and the only reason it took so long was because I had to wait for paint to dry. But I had these little plastic Christmas ornaments that you can basically shove stuff in. But I just did the same thing I did with Fibblethip. I reverse painted the eyeballs. I glued them together so they wouldn't come apart. I had some extra foam, blue foam, that was just sitting in a bucket, like a big bucket of other craft foam that was just excess. One thing, after you've been cosplaying for a while, you learn to just keep random buckets and things of the foam scrap hoard. You'll start hoarding materials because you never know when you're gonna need it. And I just so happened to need these long rectangular foam pieces for these eyeballs, and I had some extra I don't remember what the gauge is, but I had extra wire, so I just shoved some wire into the base of the eye stalks and then wrapped the wire around this extra black headband that came in a pack of 8 that I've only used now 2 of. So I wrapped it around this black headband, and I had some extra black felt from another project that I can't remember, and I just glued some felt over the wires so that it wouldn't poke you in the head. But yeah, I ended up making these little Gary eyeballs in about 2 to 3 hours, mostly because I was just waiting on paint to dry before I put another layer on. So even for something simple as a Gary from SpongeBob eyeball prop, this was all recycled stuff in my own house that I threw together for a friend to be able to do a SpongeBob group. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about Grist. Grist is probably one of my bigger costumes that I've made and worked on, and this one I think I had about 6 months to make it, so it gave me a lot of time to really break down the pieces and figure out how I was going to create the different aspects. I will say this costume as a whole is not a budget costume. Certain pieces, however, are. The head, when I went into the process of making it, I knew that the head was going to be the most iconic piece, and so since I was not competing with this, I wanted to make sure that the headpiece was something that was going to be comfortable, that I could wear for extended periods, and that was going to give that iconic Grist look. And what I decided to do was, instead of modeling it myself, I reached out to a person on Etsy that makes furry heads for a living and asked them to model and print it for me. And so I did do all of the assembly, and my husband helped with the painting of the headpiece. So that part was not budget. It was a good chunk of money, but that was something. When I went into this costume, I decided I'm going to put most of the stuff that I'm going to pay money toward that piece, and outsource it to what I would consider an expert in that field, because that is a skill that I just don't have at this point, and that's okay to recognize those things. But what I could do is figure out, how am I going to engineer these arms and do this on a budget? And I was actually really excited for it. So in my mind, I knew that Grist had these kind of mantis arms. And yeah, outsourcing the parts that would suck is always a good idea. Absolutely. And a big part of it was, a lot of costumes I have go on my head. And I've worn costumes for a lot of hours on my head, where after about 4 hours, I'm like, I think I'm dying in here. And since I was going to be wearing this as a guest in a foreign country for a lot of hours, I wanted to make dang sure that I could do this 3 days in a row and I wasn't going to die. So the part that was going to be the most, strenuous piece on me, yeah, I'm going to outsource that to a pro that's used to wearing furry helmets and making furry helmets for people, because they know what they're doing. Like, I sent them my head measurements and they did a dang good job. Thank you, furries. Yes, they are true professionals, out 100%. Um, but yeah, so I decided to focus a lot of my time and energy on making the arms, because I knew that I wanted them to look like mantis arms, because that's what the reference photo looks like. But I also knew I wanted to, really up my game and make them move. I thought that it would be a really cool feature to have moving mantis arms that I could claw at people, because I thought that would be an extra little creepy aspect I could add to this costume. So the first thing I did was I started walking around my house, and I was like, how am I going to hold these? How are these going to attach to my arms? Because obviously my real arms don't look like mantis arms. It'd be kind of sick if they did, but I'm not built that way. That's not the kind of built different that I am, sadly. So I was walking around my house just trying to figure out, where am I even going to get started? Yeah, sorry, can't be her. What am I going to be able to use to give me extra length on my arm, but then I can also attach basically another claw to? So while walking around my house, I saw these Swiffer dusters. So that was actually what kind of gave me the idea at first was, okay, if I have these like little Swiffer dusters that I can, move the top up and down where like the little dusting part would be, I was like, that would be good. That'd give me extension, and that would give me something that comes down. And so I had these two Swifter dusters in my hand, literally just walking around my house, like clawing to see if holding a stick like that would be the right type of feeling. And I was like, okay, I do like the idea of an extension and then something that curves and can adjust, but this isn't quite it. It's too skinny. It's not sturdy enough. It's not quite what I'm looking for, but it sent me on like a track of I need something to extend and I need something to attach here, but I need it to be sturdy. I need it to be something that's going to hold up to having something attach. And so that kind of got my brain going. So I walked around my house a little bit more. I went out to my garage where, a lot of junk has accumulated. And that's when I saw my crutches from when I broke my leg back in 2017. And I was like, I think we're on to something. Obviously crutches are made to be held. You can see my arm holding the crutch in the first picture. And I was like, if I saw the end of this crutch off, I can put my arm in there and I have a good handhold point that I know is sturdy because it obviously supports my, body weight. And I was like, I can work with this. So that was my jumping off point with these crutches. I'm very fortunate that one of my husband's close friends has like a wood laser cutting shop in his garage, and so this was actually us taking a small trip to his friend's house so that he could laser cut those two wooden pieces at the very end. Um, I was able to measure where the holes in the crutch are that would typically hold the adjustable rod that we took out. And so we laser cut the wooden pieces. I have a couple of spacers. Like these are just little spacers to keep the wood from, um, kind of collapsing in on itself. So we put those in, and then the bolt at the far right side, that is actually where I did the attachment point for a wire. So how the full arm works is I have a little wire loop that attaches to the far right bolt that comes down, and I have like a little pull string that with one finger of force, I can pull it and it will pull the wooden piece on the left side up, and then there's a spring attachment. You can actually see where the spring is on the left side. The spring will snap it back down into the closed position. So it's just like a little pulley system with a spring to keep it closed when I'm not applying pressure. So that's the inside of Grist's arms, and it's just a few bolts. Fun fact, Ryan, I am an engineer. I'm a geotechnical engineer, so this is a little out of my wheelhouse, but that is kind of how my brain works. Is I knew I wanted something to be able to move. I wanted to be able to use a little bit of force on my hand, because if I was going to be holding these all day, I can't be using too much, force on my fingers. I'm going to wear myself out like that. So this is the inside base of my grist arm, and I used a crutch. We used a little bit of sawing power to saw the crutch off in certain places. A friend of ours had the wood and the laser cutter to help cut the holes and do the precision woodwork, but that's something that you might be able to outsource or get help with using at a makerspace. And then it was just a couple of bolts and a spring. So that's the base of the grist arms, and most of it was just reused, a reused crutch, a few little hardware tools, and overall pretty cheap. The the next part, it did cost a little bit of money. I won't steer you wrong there, but I ended up getting, I believe it's insulation foam from Yeah, I picked it up from Lowe's or Home Depot, one of those places. But it's just like I think it was about an inch thick insulation foam. And I ended up basically sawing that and fitting it into the wood and getting it to attach. Um, so that is what the actual claw is made of, is the insulation foam that was sawn down with, basically I used a box cutter to kind of shape it. And then once I got it into about the right shape, I used a Dremel to do some of the detailing. And then I basically just Mod Podged it and painted it. The rest of the arm piece, I used just, what was it, 5 millimeter foam? And that's what covers my actual arm, is that there's a foam casing that comes around my arm and comes down. And I actually use um, sweatbands that I sewed to the end of that crutch. There's like a little nylon strap that comes off the base of that uh, crutch that's kind of close to where my elbow is. And then I sewed a uh, sweatband to that. And that's actually what keeps the arms up for the most part on my arms, is uh, sweatbands. You know, not everything has to be um, what I would consider a like professional piece. Like sweatbands are okay. You can put those in your costumes if it helps things stay up on your arms. So that's my grist arms. Yeah, and it's on the inside. Nobody's gonna see it, and it helps it stay up, and it helps catch my sweat when I get hot. So that's the grist arms. For my grist skirt, it's funny enough, I don't think a lot of people realize when they see the costume that the skirt is literally 500 plus bugs that were hand stitched to some tulle. But I bought these little like jewelry hooks, and I sat at my computer for, I don't know, maybe a week, just screwing jewelry hooks into fake plastic roaches and fake plastic flies that I had bought in bulk online. And then after I had screwed all of those jewelry hooks into them, yeah, in retrospect, should I have done that? Maybe not. I don't know. I did it, and it turned out well. Because how else are you going to attach a ton of bugs to a skirt and try to ensure that they don't fall off? Because believe me, I did consider hot gluing or gluing them, but I didn't have confidence that with only glue on what is a pretty light fabric, that they would not fall off or tear or ruin the fabric. So yeah, I hand screwed all of these jewelry hooks into fake bugs, and then I hand stitched them onto this tulle fabric that is basically just a wraparound skirt. I put little belt loops onto the waistband, and so I can just run a belt through the top, and it's just a open front skirt that flows behind me, and that is basically Grist's body. Um, but that goes back to kind of considering what your time frame is. That took me a really, really long time to hand sew more than 500 fake bugs onto a skirt. But honestly, I think it's probably one of my favorite aspects of this costume, because once people like really look at it, it freaks them out, and I love that. Um, Probably more than I should. But uh, it was something really cool, and overall, I probably spent more money on fake bugs than I like to admit. But if you can go to like maybe a children's toy store, like resale place, you might be able to find fake bugs for more of a discount than what I did. But yeah, that is my Grist costume for the most part. The headpiece turned out great. That I spent a lot of money on, so I won't talk about that part too much. But these are some of the kind of ways I got creative and crafty with my Grist costume. Um, I think that's the last slide I have for the presentation. So if anybody has any questions or would like to know about any other costumes I've done or any other pieces you've seen or just want to know more about it, please feel free to ask away.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Misha. I learned a lot about where to get tools and how to do this kind of stuff, and just what kind of creativity you really need to have. So, y'all, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat or click on the little hand right up on the top. You can come up and speak. I'm going to ask my question first, though. Are you ready for this?
Yeah. Oh, let me
Okay, so here's my
restart the
question.
presentation. Okay.
How do you travel with cosplay? I know you said you took Gris to another country. What was your strategy there?
Okay, so remember how I said at the very beginning that you've got to ask yourself important questions before you get started? That is one that I left off because if you are not local to where you're going and you have to travel, that's a very important question that you definitely need to consider at the conception of you creating your costume. One thing you can do is figure out first what luggage you're bringing. Are you bringing a large suitcase? My Slimefoot costume, I actually ended up, uh, I now store it in what are kind of like totes because it gives me a little bit more space to work with. But figuring out what luggage you're going to work with, figuring out the dimensions of the luggage, and basically designing the costume within those dimensions. And you do have to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room because if it's a fragile costume, you're going to want to probably bubble wrap it or put some sort of protective lining in that suitcase. Figuring out how you're going to be able to pack things potentially within other things. Like my Slimefoot costume has like arm bracers and hip bracers. Those all got bubble wrapped and kind of shoved into the chest piece. So it's a little bit of playing Tetris. It's also just a little bit of making sure that it's going to be less than your luggage, or figuring out how can this costume break down into smaller pieces that can be reassembled at the con. Grist has back spikes that are attached. They have like little screw attachments, so I can unscrew the pieces and then rescrew them in once I get to a con because those spikes definitely can't travel if they're attached.
The bubble wrap is so smart. I love that.
Oh yeah, I have so much bubble wrap.
All right,
Alright,
Ryan
so
has a question. Any tips for changing the appearance of fabrics? Any material recommendations? Bleach, dyes, paints?
alright, yes. So there if you're wanting to change the appearance of a fabric, like doing a different texture, there are tutorials if you're trying to change textures. That's not something I'm specialized in, but I know that those are there are techniques to do it. Um, as far as just changing like colors, there are a lot of dyes. I think it's Rit dye is a very common one that you can pick up at most craft places. Yeah, Rit. Craft places, Walmart has it. You may need to do some test strips. So if you get your dye out, you might want to put a extra piece of scrap of the same material in it and see how that does and see like sometimes if you need to put it in for longer or if you need to do it like dip it more than once. Those are some things that at least for dyeing that you have to think of. Bleach is a little bit harder because depending on the material and depending on how dark it is, it it might require more bleach, it might require less bleach. So um, this isn't stuff that I'm off the top of my head 100% sure about, but it's things that you can definitely with a Google search kind of look up. But what you want to know going into it is what type of dye are you using and try to figure out what type of fabric it is because the fabric type is also going to be a big consideration because natural fibers versus not natural fibers are going to react differently. And then definitely try doing test strips. One thing I will say about dyes is that whenever you are using like a giant pot for the dye, you do not ever want to use that as a cooking utensil ever again. So if you're going to dye something, go find yourself a big pot at thrift store that it doesn't have to look nice, doesn't have to look fancy. Get it as cheap as you can because it will never be for food. The utility pot. So, as just a safety consideration, don't don't die in the same pot that you're making dinner.
All right, Headless, you have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and say it out loud.
So I've seen people take anamorphic characters and change them into like more humanoid.
Hmm.
Do you have like for switching a character from a out of its reference material to suit what you're looking for? Do you have any like recommendations or like thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever I'm looking at something and I see the reference point and I'm like, that's not exactly something I can do 100%. Kind of like what you're saying with taking an anamorphic character and making it, maybe a little bit less, you know, fuzzy. What you can do is figure out what are some of the more like key aspects. Like, is it what type of creature is it? Is it a wolf? Is it a cat? And figuring out like what do those ears look like. A lot of the times you can find people that have made different type of animal ears and figure out what type of shape would a wolf have versus a fox or a cat, and just do like ears. A lot of it also will be just kind of like figuring out what kind of makeup you want to do, because if you're not going the more like fuzzy route, figuring out how to do like the different patterns. If it's a character like obviously we had Fox Jace, still incorporating some of like the Jace facial makeup while adding in, whiskers and some of like the fox features would be a way to do that. So my approach would be figure out what are some of the um more like characteristic aspects of the character, and then making sure that those are present so you know who it is or what it is you're looking at, and then trying to accentuate with makeup to make it into whatever type of uh, like furry creature it is, if that makes sense.
Awesome tips. I love that. It is so hard to like do that kind of, I don't know, the manipulation of the features into something you can paint on your face without a reference. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging, but a lot of people, honestly, makeup artists do a fantastic job. I've watched like I will be the first to admit I am not great at makeup myself, but I love watching like Face Off and those type of
Yes.
things. Like those are just so impressive. I watch them and I'm like, I could do that, and I'm like, wow, they make it look so easy.
Uh,
Um,
Face Off is
and going
amazing.
Yes, but that also goes back to practicing. If you're trying to go for a specific look, practice at your house. Try to do, like just try to get the look down, because your first attempt may not be right. It may not be
Mm.
what you like, but do a look, take some pictures, and honestly, you could probably post some in the cosplay Discord and ask for tips, because somebody that's better at makeup than me might be able to tell you, hey, try this technique, try this. This might help with certain things, and be able to give you, constructive criticism on how you can improve.
Love that. Okay, I have another question. Feel free to drop yours in chat also. How do you keep costumes comfortable for like long wear or the weather? I know you talked about the Gris costume. You identified pieces that would be easier to get made.
This one is hard. um, it's a challenge because I will be the first to admit not every one of my costumes is comfy. Um, I had when I made Slimefoot, granted that was my first time doing a really big build. Um, I couldn't sit down without taking off my hip plates because they go all the way from my waist all the way to above my knee, and that did not account for bending. So I was up, and if I wanted to sit down, the parts of the costume had to come fully off. So I guess what I would say is, if it's a big build like that, figure out the best way to basically be able to remove it quickly and easily. Like if there's a way to have like a quick detach, because that way you can go. I know I personally found like the quiet room at MagicCon and just had a nice little sit down. I took off some pieces. I drank some water and had a good sit down for about a half an hour to, cool down, decompress. Um, so first off, I would say just quick, quick attach and detach points for costumes. Some other things. So with Grist, that skirt, I obviously have back spikes, so I cannot sit in a chair like a normal human, because I'm not a normal human in that. I'm a creature. So what I did do was I figured out if I can't sit that way, I can at least make the front a little bit easier. Um, so I just take a chair and I flip it around and I sit in a chair that's flipped backwards.
You do the Riker sit.
Yeah, and the arms do come off pretty easy since they are basically kind of held on by my sweatbands, and then I'm actually like physically holding them very lightly at the actual crutch holding point. I can just kind of flip the arms off and on relatively easy. So if I do want my hands free, because that costume, if I'm wearing it, I don't have hands, I have claws. But if I do want my arms free, I can just slide my arms in and out. So it definitely is one of those planning pieces of at the very beginning, like, how am I going to take this off, put this back on? What kind of considerations do I need for this costume? And sometimes they're just not going to be comfy, and I hate to say that.
So true.
Yeah, it is not art if there's no pain. I can't tell you how many times I've bled and cried on costumes.
We suffer
It's
for
just
it.
too many. Yeah.
All right. Any last minute questions? Get them in. Here's my last one. Are you ready? What's your favorite thrift store?
Yes. Okay, so there is actually, I actually just went to this one. It's in Richmond, and I believe the name of it was called Diversity Thrift. It was so cool. My nephew and my sister came and visited recently, and my nephew's apparently super into thrifting now. And so his big thing was he wanted to check out some really cool thrift stores, and someone recommended that one to me, and it was very gay. There was all sorts
Love
of
it.
rainbows and cool decorations, and it was just, even the way it was arranged was really neat. So if you're ever in the Richmond area, go check out Diversity Thrift because it's a very cool thrift store.
Yeah. Local thrift stores are always better than like a Goodwill or whatever, but you can find cool stuff there too.
Yeah, but I very recently went to that one and I was very impressed and had a great time, so highly recommend.
Amazing. All right, Misha, is there anything you want to leave the audience with? And tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, I just want to say that no matter what level of cosplay you're at, if you're just beginning, if you've been doing this for a long time, if you've taken a break and are just coming back into it, cosplay's for anybody. If you have a low budget, no budget. There are ways to get into it, and there are all sorts of resources. Definitely check out the Discord. I'm always happy to talk and help, spitball ideas. I know that I always come up with some weird things, and so it may or may not be your cup of tea, but I'm always happy to help and give ideas on how I think you can put something together. I can't make it for you, but I will be happily try to help you. But yeah, you can find me on most social medias at magic_Mishamigo. On Blue Sky, it's just Magic Mishamigo, all smushed together because you can't have underscores.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this presentation. This has been another episode of the Tabletop Talks. You can find the link to the rest of the Tabletop Talk playlist. And if you want to come live to the next one, just shoot me a message on social media. My name is Jane Plays Magic. You can also message Black Nito and Ryan and Zana if you want invite to the Discord. Any magic creators are invited. Next week on August 13th, we have Katie Karlov talking about booking great EDH pods, so don't miss that one. Thanks for coming by, y'all. We'll see you later.